Uh, Guys, welcome back to the Hushlife podcast. This is episode number, it's a big number for us, number 20. We're being somewhat consistent on these. We need to do a better job. We're trying to get one a week done. So if you do the math, we haven't been super consistent, but this is episode 20. We are joined by an eclectic group of guests today. You guys know we have my son, Mr. Gager. Up there in the top left is Logie Bear, and down in the bottom is Mr. Lane Mckellar. I met Lane actually about a year ago. We went and did a trip over on the South Fork with the Camp Chef boys, and Lane and one of his buddies were in charge of rowing us down the river. And that's kind of how I got my introduction to Lane. But why don't you introduce yourself to the Hushlife audience?
Yeah, Lane Mckellar. So obviously survived that one safely. We rode you down the river without any major incidents, but had a great time. Been in the fishing industry for about 20 years. Just love to fish. Got start from my grandma actually taught me how to fish from the age of 3, 4, 5 years old. She taught me to tie my first knots, all that good stuff. And yeah, I just loved it. And then stole my dad's fly rod when I was about 12. Good old eagle claw combo setup, and got going that way. And just love everything about fishing. Doesn't matter what it is. If it swims, I want to catch it. And that got me. Honestly, it's how I chose where I was going to go to school. All sorts of impacts on life. And got to the point where got involved with a couple different companies. One of those being River Rat, which is a raft company that kind of featured a major part in this trip, and excited to talk about that.
So I met Lane about a year ago on that fishing trip, and then he'd reached back out to me this summer, and asked if we wanted to try out one of the River Rats. I've been on one, I've floated one, super awesome. Basically, the best way I can explain it, and Lane, you can do a better job, is an inflatable, packable drift boat is the way I would explain it.
Yeah. In fact, we were able to break it down into 2 boxes for this trip, right? Yep. 170 total pounds for a 3-man drift raft, if you will. And it made a major part of that trip. I mean, thinking back, I was thinking about this yesterday. Just in the days that we were there, that river dropped a couple feet?
At least 2 feet.
Yeah, it was amazing. Even the guides were just like, holy cow, this is unbelievable how fast the water's dropping. And there's some of that stuff that we just may not have been able to access without a raft. So it made it fun. I know it made it fun for them, but River Rat definitely is cool that way. It's packable, shippable, and still has pretty significant capacity, 1,200 pounds. So makes it fun, keeps you safe, and can do a lot of fun things with it.
And to go along with that, I think it's a great boat, especially for a guy like Gage or a guy like me, to learn how to row and navigate a river, for sure. A drift boat's a great tool. It's a lot bigger, a lot heavier, a little tougher to maybe row and get you in some places that you don't want to be. But a River Rat's perfect because it's light. You can pick it up and move it if you need to, and very easy to row. So that's what I'm looking forward to, getting ours and, getting Gage out in the water and hopefully learning how to row a boat.
Yeah.
Both of us. Anyways, topic of discussion today, guys. We'll get back into the River Rat more, but we just got back from, I'm not going to say it was a trip. I'm going to say it was an Alaskan adventure. We went to Alaska for 7-8 days and did one of the coolest fishing trips I could have ever imagined in all my life of wanting to go to Alaska. So I'm going to set up the scenario of how this trip got to be where it was at. I was talking to my buddy earlier this summer, Mr. Chris Geikema from Compass West Outfitters, and we were talking about Alaska. And I told him, I said, I've never been to Alaska, but if I was to go, and when I go, this is the trip I would really like to get my feet wet up there. And so I said, I love the idea of going and catching fish to bring home, but more than that, and I still need to do that. We still need to go and get some groceries, but more than that, I want to go experience like the interior part of Alaska and the river systems. I want to go fly fish for all different species that are in Alaska. And so I explained this to Chris, and immediately he goes, you got to go check out my buddies, Dave Duncan and Sons. They run an outfit up there. They've been doing it since I think the early 80s. They've had these camps. And anyway, he explained this to me and I go, man, it sounds exactly like what I'm looking for. And he goes, well, you know, they're probably booked out like everybody else is because of whatever COVID or whatever the reason is. Outfitters and guides, their bookings are up upwards of 200%. You know, everything got pushed from last year to this year, and you know, so on. So all I did was I went and emailed one of the Duncans, Brad Duncan. I said, hey man, really looking at doing one of these trips one of these years. Let me know like your next availability, thinking it might be the 2022 season or 2023 season. Just get my name on the list. Well, that night I was at lacrosse practice with him, and I got a phone call from Alaska. And I was like, who is this? And I answered it, and it was Brad Duncan. And he had called to tell me that he had just had 4 spots open up for the 2021 season this summer. And I immediately said, I don't know who I'm bringing, but put me down for all 4. So first thing I did was called Bmack. I said, Brian, because Brian's been wanting to do a trip like this as well. I said, where are you at these dates? And told him the reasoning. And he was a little bummed out. He had some prior engagements he had to be to, mother-in-law's wedding, but he wasn't able to come. So I knew I was going to take Gage, because I did tell Gage a few years ago. I said, my first trip to Alaska, I want it to be with you. I want you to be there with me. And so I knew Gage was going to come. I knew my mom was going to make me take Logan.
Wow.
Makes me hang out with him. And then I didn't know who else I was going to take. And then me and Lane had just had the conversation about doing some river rat stuff. And so immediately I called Lane. I said, hey man, here's an idea. What do you think about going to Alaska for a week and possibly taking a river rat up there with us and trying it out? And so I called Lane, and Lane took a little didn't take convincing. He had some prior engagements as well, correct?
I did. Well, first of all, thank you, Bmack, for being dedicated to the family like I wasn't. But yeah, like I mean, it was short notice. Like, well, we were like 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out.
3 weeks at the most.
So yeah, it was short. And so, yeah, my immediate response was no. It turned out I knew somebody that had been a guide up there, called and talked to him one evening. All I heard about was the mouse fishing. Mouse fishing for rainbows. And it was just like, everything else ended. It was done. I was in.
Yeah. So Lane, like I said, had some things going on those times. And so he was trying to figure it out. And I did start doing some research, and I found this guy that Lane guides with in Utah or Wyoming. And I go, hey, ask this guy, do you know this Mark guy? And Lane's like, yeah, I'm guiding with him Thursday. I'm like, sweet, talk to him about it. I think he was a guide up there for like 12 years. That night, I just got one text. Now, in my head, this is what happened is Lane started talking to Mark about this on the trip. As soon as he got off the river, he goes, I'm in. And that's all it took. Is that how it went?
That's it. That was exactly how it went.
So, yeah. So the trip was planned. And we were going to go to Alaska for 7 days and go fishing. So let's talk about logistics. In my head, I always thought logistics getting to Alaska might be tough. We've done some trips to Canada a few times, up in Saskatchewan. And to be honest, logistics to get up there are a little tough, no matter how you like cut it. We drove the whole way the first year. Gage went with us, and it was 16-hour drive?
That was long.
Which isn't terrible, but it's a couple days in the truck. The next year we flew from Salt Lake to Saskatoon, I believe. And then it was still like an 8-hour drive after that. So that's a little tough, but Alaska was super easy, I thought. We got on a plane from Salt Lake to Seattle to Anchorage, stayed the night in Anchorage, and then did Anchorage to Bethel and Bethel to another small town, where then we met up with the Duncan and Sons and got on boats and drove up the river about 45 minutes an hour. And we were at the lower base camp of the Duncan and Sons. And so, like Lane said earlier, we did all that, which was super easy. We had one layover, which was nice. I planned it that way. And we took a 170-pound boat with us. And flying Alaska Air was amazing. They had no issues with it. They charged us. If we would have done it right, it would have been, $80 extra to take that boat?
Yeah. Yep.
And
even as it was, it ended up being $200.
$200
to get a boat to Alaska is amazing. Yeah, I couldn't have been more impressed with Alaska helping us out.
Yeah, but if you're going to Alaska to do any sort of hunting or fishing, I would definitely look at Alaska Air, especially if you're going hunting and you can fly meat back for super cheap. I think that's the airline to go through when you go to Alaska. So we get there, guys. What were your original thoughts when we hit base camp, Logie?
We're in the middle of nowhere, dude. Just the boat ride. So you land on this tiny little airstrip, and there's this comical little building that says airport, and it's like a one room building, and it was shut down due to COVID or whatever. But it really hits you that you're in the middle of nowhere. But that boat ride from the airstrip to camp was just spectacular. So we had like a 45-minute boat ride up the river from the airstrip to the base camp. And it was cool because the whole ride up, you were just looking at areas that you were going to be fishing throughout the week. And that's exactly what we did.
What were your thoughts when we hit base camp?
Well, I remember like right before like we went on that the single prop, that little airport, they were like, get your waders on. And it's like, what?
Oh yeah. Part of the story. So before we got there, they were having absolutely terrible weather. Like the season has started out for those guys pretty slow. They had really cold weather, which isn't great for trout fishing or for bringing salmon in. And it rained pretty much every day for 2 weeks. And so when we showed up in Bethel, which we still had, a 45-minute airplane ride to get to where we were going, they told us in the airport, which is another small airport, get your waders on. We were all like, what? But it had been raining so much, they wanted us to be ready. So when we got off the plane to get on the boats, if it was raining, we weren't going to get soaked before we got to camp. So what were your thoughts when we hit base camp, Lane?
Yeah, super impressed with the Duncans. They obviously have things dialed. Walked in, everything is organized, plenty of space. We ended up each having the feeling that I got. I assumed that when we got there, we'd be sharing for sure. But when we got there, the feeling I got was even when camp is completely 100% full, everybody basically gets their own 2-person tent, like very spacious. There's 2 cots in there, floor space, heater. Man, it felt like those guys have it set up for comfort for sure, considering where you're at. I mean, on the edge of the Bering Sea, right? We're out there. And the amenities that we had were amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy to see because they can't leave that stuff. In my head, what I thought was, how much work does it take to get this camp in here? And like I said earlier, these guys have been doing it since the 80s. So I'm sure every year they improve a little bit until they get to this point where you have this absolutely phenomenal camp. But like Lane was saying, they have a giant, huge cook/eating tent where you could fit probably 40 dudes in there to eat. They have, like he said, tents for everyone. When we talk about tents, they're like structured tents. Yeah. You can stand up, change. There's 2 cots in there, plenty of space. And then they had flushable toilets, which was completely wild to me. They had
a running shower.
They had a warm shower next to the river. Like it was awe-inspiring to me. Just wondering how many trips up that river it must have took them to get all that stuff up there. And then at the end of the year, they have to take that amount of boat trips back down the river, taking all the stuff out. So pretty incredible is what they have set up there. That's for sure. So tell me this. I always talk about this, like every time I go into a hunt or a fishing trip or whatever it might be in life, I always have like these expectations I build up in my head. And usually I build up the expectations to be way higher than they need to be. So for the last little while, I've been trying not to do that so much. I did fail at that because after I figured out we were actually going, I went and watched every YouTube video I could find about these guys. I watched every video I could find about the river we were going to fish on, and pretty much every fly fishing video in Alaska. And so I felt like I was well prepared to know like what we were getting into. But what were your guys' expectations going into this thing?
Lane?
Mine were set high. I'm like you. I have not been to Alaska before. Always been on the list, always been near the top of the list. And so my expectations were high and had done the same thing, seen videos. And so it's not hard to get your expectations up. And in the text that I've been sending buddies and stuff like that the last few days and being home, that has been something consistently that I've said exceeded expectations. I know that it's fishing. I know that it's possible that it's not always like that when you go up there. But man, the experience that we had, what I felt coming back from that trip was just like, it exceeded everything that I'd hoped for.
Yeah, I'd say that same thing, man, along with the fishing. Just like Casey, I hopped on, watched a bunch of videos, and it is fishing. And expectations was even if it's slow, it's going to be great. So I was thinking that, and then weather-wise, I was prepared for rain, maybe even possibly snow, windy, just thinking the worst, And this was actually my second trip to Alaska, and both times, the weeks that I've spent there, beautiful weather. We had sun like most of the days. The worst we ever had was a little bit overcast and windy, and it was almost like we wanted the wind to keep the bugs away. So weather was great, and then food-wise, there's not even bugs there. What are you talking about? That was actually my first impression of camp. Is I got off the boat and I was like, wow, you guys got a lot of fruit flies around here.
Yeah, I remember because Lane and Logan were in a boat ahead of me and Gage. We're about probably 5 minutes behind them. And we finally get to camp, and Logan and Lane had jumped off the boat and kind of had looked around. And Logan had a big smile on his face. And man, this place is awesome. Do you have the DEET?
I need that.
When you're on the river, going 10 miles an hour, we're out 50 miles an hour, how fast we're going, the bugs aren't bothering you. As soon as you pull off at a gravel bar or a camp, man, they just find you instantly.
Yeah. Yeah, so, they were thick, just like crawling on your face as soon as you got off the boat. But there are ways to prevent it.
Well, I think I told somebody this like midweek. I go, man, if it wasn't for the bugs, everybody would be up here. So maybe exactly right. Maybe that's the thing we need to like preach about is, man, if you don't like mosquitoes, don't go to Alaska. Yeah. What was your thoughts when we hit base camp, Gage?
Well, like before, like when you're on the airplane, I thought we'd be staying in like a 2-man tent, like the smaller ones.
Like a backpack tent?
Yeah.
Okay.
But when we got up there, it was like super duper nice, and everybody was super nice, and it just felt like comfy and warm.
You're comfy. He was comfy and warm, guys. That's the most important thing. Gage was comfy and warm.
That's cozy.
So yeah, day one, we get to camp. We get there probably about 5:30 in the afternoon. And one of the things we were wondering when we go up there, I've always heard like, and I assumed that where we were at was going to be the same way, but in Alaska this time of year, it doesn't get dark. And so we get there at 5, and I was like kind of asking, they're like, yeah, it gets dark for like 2 hours a night. It's all. And I'm like, okay, so it probably gets like sunset, and the sun's down, but you can kind of see. And then, for 2 hours, it's pitch black. They're being serious. It doesn't get even close to dark until, I think it's 2 till 4 right now, and it's somewhat dark. But you just watch the sun, man, and it just like goes in this big circle around the sky, and like it never really disappears, which was pretty wild, I thought.
Yeah.
So anyway, first night in camp, we weren't going to go fishing or anything. We were just going to get all our stuff together, eat some food, kind of have a orientation about what, what's to be expected out of our guides, what's expected out of us. And there's this really pretty section of water up at camp. And so immediately Logan's like, Lane, let's go get some shots, So Lane gets wadered up, or he was wadered up, went to grab his fly rods, and just proceeded to catch a couple bad, really cool fish right there at camp.
Yeah, it was insane. Like instant. I think it was like second or third cast. We're like, oh, there's a rainbow on a huge streamer. Yeah. And then 2-3 casts later, landed grayling, and turns out it was the biggest grayling that had been caught to that point in the year. I think Gage later on decided to catch a bigger one, but
it's so funny, man. Like you caught that fish, and I was like, yeah, Lane caught a fish. And then Gage grabbed his rod, Casey grabbed his rod, wadered up, and I set the camera down and grabbed my rod.
It was game on after that. It's just one of those things. Like, you look at this river and you're like, okay, it's probably not like the best place to fish or whatever. This is camp. But as soon as somebody catches a fish, you're like, oh, it's a possibility. Let's go.
We're in.
Yeah.
And then within like 10, 15 minutes, we had how many species?
I think we caught, so you caught a trout, grayling. I caught a Dolly Varden. What'd you catch? Trout, like 3 species, like immediately. Yeah. And that's another thing to mention about this river, which I thought was going to be really cool going into it is, for us, like trout fishing is what we do here in the West, right? In the lower 48, especially on the West Coast. And so going up to Alaska, it kind of seems silly to go target trout, but at the same time, the trout up there are a little different. I would say majority of people that fly fish and have for a while, the ultimate for me anyways would to be catch fish on giant dry flies. And for us, that's a big giant mouse pattern. And what we heard going into it was the trout like to eat the mouse, because we try it down here like I've tried it numerous times. The last couple of years, I made it a goal to try to catch a trout on a mouse pattern in Idaho. And, you know, a lot of guys that go and do it at night. And that's like really the only time like big brown will hit a mouse is at night, and or if it's like perfect conditions. But what I had heard going up there is like these fish will eat a mouse pattern all day long. So what was cool though, going back was, so we're going to be able to fish for trout. We're going to be able to fish for dolly vardens, which I thought might think is one of the coolest fish up there, especially later in the summer. We didn't get to really experience it, but when they start to color up and get those beautiful like reds and oranges and yellows, like go Google a picture of a dolly varden colored up. You guys will see what I'm talking about. But then there's grayling, and then there's all 5 species of salmon, Pacific salmon, that run into that river. Not all 5 species are there at the same time, but I think when we were there, like 3 out of the 5 were going to be there. And so going into it, that's what I thought would be cool, was you could catch all these different species. And the way they have it designed is you kind of tell your guide in the morning, like what you want to go target. If you want to go target rainbows, if you want to go target dollies, if you want to go target salmon, they can kind of like plan the day around what you're looking at doing.
Wasn't only like the silvers weren't in while we were there?
So the silvers weren't in, and then it's not a pink year is what they say. Even years are when the pink salmon run in, even though there were a few in there, like on even years, the bigger number of pinks come in. So the silvers and pinks really weren't going to be in the river while we were there. So we had kings,
king salmon,
chums, and sockeyes.
Sockeyes, yeah.
And before we got there, they were struggling with the sockeye. They really hadn't shown up yet. And then when we got there, like the numbers really started pouring into the rivers. And
And one of the things I wasn't clear on, because they said that I caught a humpy. Is that a subspecies, or is that?
So yeah, you're right. So
I think they call pinks humpies. Yeah, because that when I caught a pink, and Jacob said he caught a pink, and then later that day he called it a humpy.
That's right. So pinks are humpies.
Got it. Okay.
Which we did catch a handful of them.
Yeah. We literally, so in that one river system, we caught every species in that system minus the silver. So we caught sockeye, chum, pinks, rainbow trout, dolly varden, grayling, 6 species. What other place can you fish a river system and catch 6 species like that?
And pretty consistently too. Like I said, if you wanted to go do like dolly varden fishing, they would take you to a spot and they'd be like, yep, bunch of dollies. And then you tie on the appropriate gear to catch them. And you would, especially the dollies, they get in big old schools kind of in like shallower water, and you run an egg by them and they can't resist it.
Yeah. We even had days where we caught all 6 species in the same day, right? Like it's totally doable.
Oh, for sure.
So that was really cool.
And yeah, one of the things, because they know the water so well, one of the things that really stood out to me was even within a 60-yard section of water, you could point at the kind of water and they'd be like, okay, you want to fish for kings, you go stand over there. You want sockeye, this is your run. And then see those root balls over there? There's your rainbows.
That's where your mouse eaters are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So day one, we were just like blown away, caught 3 different species, like within 100 feet of our tents, which was cool. I didn't know how well I was going to sleep just with the it not going to get dark. I slept like a baby the first night. I never did see it get dark, because we went to bed at like 11:30. Still, you know, it looked like it was 7:30 here in Idaho. And then you wake up at 7 and, you know, it's bright. So we never actually saw darkness. I don't think I saw darkness until we got back to Seattle, flying home to Salt Lake.
Yeah, that was weird. There was one night, dude, where I woke up at like 3 in the morning, and it was day like 4, and it tripped me out because I was like, whoa, it's dark. I like woke up to go pee or something, and it was dark outside. But it's only dark for like an hour.
Yeah. So we wake up first morning of fishing, get a great breakfast in. These guys, only downfall of these guys, and I hate saying this, is they almost feed you too much.
Yeah.
Food is amazing. They load you, like every meal is like a 4 or 5 course meal.
Yeah.
Great food, phenomenal food. And so we ate breakfast, and we all decided we wanted to trout fish, right?
Yeah.
So we took we took just a regular, is that a John boat they run? How would you describe that? A sled?
Yeah, day one, it was a flat bottom. That one was a prop boat. They did have some jet boats in camp, but that day they ran a prop boat, but they were Willie boats. And
Yep.
what was interesting is it's a company out of, I think it was
Oregon.
and that guy custom made those boats for that river. So I think technically they'd be a modified V, because up front they've got kind of that pointy bow to break water, but then the bottom is flat.
Yeah. They told a cool story about Willie himself, like went up there fishing. And I don't know the exact story about, he owned a company and then like it sold part of it, and he was under this non-disclosure or non-compete. He couldn't build boats for a while. And so he went up there and fished with those guys, and he was like, your guys' boats suck. And they're like, well, build us a boat then. And so I think he was out of his non-compete, and he literally, every Willie boat they have up there was custom built by Willie for that river, like Lane said, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, day one, we take out the Willie boat and the prop, and we throw, like we were talking about, the river rat still light. A couple guys just pick it up, put it on the front of the boat. And because we're going to go fish this side channel. The river was pretty big at the time, but then there's all these side channels that run off of it and kind of get braided a little bit. And that's usually where the really good trout fishing is, where you can really like hone in on the trout. And so that's what we went and did the first day. And what was everybody's thoughts like halfway through day one?
My thoughts were, man, this is the most epic fishing footage I've ever captured.
After like fish 5, I was like,
And then I lost it.
Logan.
Yeah, he had like video evidence of unicorns and
Dude, I had
Bigfoot.
Yeah, Squatch was pulling
Unicorns riding Bigfoot, or vice versa.
Squatch fought a bear with a salmon as a sword. It was crazy.
Guys, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't watched the videos from Alaska, please go back and do so. They are up on the channel now. But just so you know, day one, like Logan said, we captured some amazing trout eats, some awesome fishing, caught a bunch of fish. I think Gage was upwards of 40 fish?
yeah.
40 plus fish that day, throwing either a mouse or a streamer, which, I mean, go hand in hand. I love a big mouse eat, but a streamer eat is like, the feeling of it's probably just as cool. Anyway, so we had all this great footage. We have drone footage, all this cool stuff. And we lost day one.
That's in my career, my very first card failure. I've had a hard drive failure, but that was my very first card failure I've ever had. Sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks, but I think we had enough time to make up for it.
We definitely, go watch the video if you haven't seen it yet. We definitely, we made up for it.
Yeah.
It's just funny though, because to me is like, I don't remember that one day nearly as well. I feel like I remember days so much better, like while I'm recording them or like while I'm watching back from that day, but I don't remember that day super well. I kind of do.
Did you even record that day?
Maybe that's why.
The card's just blank. It wasn't a card malfunction. It was just, it's blank.
There's nothing on it.
There's nothing to recover.
No, I do remember getting set up for those shots with like, that was the day you and, was it you and Lane that floated the side channel or you and Gage?
It was Lane and Gage.
Lane and Gage, yeah. And we set up, and I think you were recording on the big camera and I was flying the drone. Those are like, that's like the only moments I really remember, but I do remember getting some like insane. We caught so many rainbows that day as a group, upwards of like what, 80 fish?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd say over 100 fish.
Over 100 fish. That's pretty great for as fishing goes.
What was wild? What I would say the big difference between the rainbows we were catching up there. So they're rainbow trout, but they call them, are they leopard rainbow trout?
Yeah.
Is that their name? So they're just more spots. They're absolutely gorgeous. But dude, these fish are so eager to eat that you could run a mouse by and a mouse might, or a trout might attack the mouse. You might not get the hook up. But if your buddy on the back of the boat runs like a Dalai Lama, that fish will eat immediately, man. That was very eye-opening to me that day one.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah,
go ahead, Lane.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that was eye-opening. And then the other eye-opening thing was even like if you're throwing a Dalai Lama, and we're saying Dalai Lama, but just picture like a big streamer. You'll be floating down, you'll throw it in a spot you think's good and be stripping in. Maybe you're talking, you feel a bite, you set, the fish is gone. Here back home, it's like, dang it, I missed that chance, I missed that opportunity. I might throw it back, probably won't get anything. There, I literally had days where I'd get a bite and I could get 5 bites out of that fish. Like you get so many chances to catch it. Like he's not going to hit it and leave. Even if you poke him a little bit, they'll still hit your stuff.
And what stood out too was you got to watch the whole thing. That water's clear, and you know we're not guessing that was the same fish. You could watch that fish hit, eat, miss, turn, cast back out to it 2 or 3 feet ahead, and he comes again and again and again.
Yeah. That was like my big takeaway from that day was just, man, like these fish are so eager to eat. And like Lane said, man, watching a fish like attack a streamer is pretty fun.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do yourself a favor though. Like, don't fish in the same boat as Gage if you want some self-esteem left at the end of the day. Like, I don't even remember them calling him Gage up there. They called him Stick, right? That was just like who he was. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
That kid can fish, flat out fish. So that was fun.
Come a long way. He's only been fly fishing for probably 4 years now, 4 or 5 years. And at first it was a little bit of a struggle for him, frustrating. Like anybody starting to try to fly fish, it can be frustrating at first. And I think a lot of people do it for a few years and kind of give up on it. But Gage stuck with it, and he showed some of his moves that week.
Yeah, not only was he crushing the fishing game, but he also tied up some patterns that he caught fish on. So not only fishing, he's tying his own flies.
That was also a really cool thing up there. They had like this whole fly tying table up there, and they would like, if you needed help, they would teach you how to do it.
So Gage learned how to tie a mouse up.
Yep.
Right.
I tied a mouse and I tied a streamer, Dalai Lama.
You caught some fish on your own patterns.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It was super cool. Yeah.
I tried to become a tie flyer when I was about Gage's age, and I stuck with it for about 3 months and gave up pretty quick.
Well, maybe you shouldn't be a tie flyer. Maybe you should be a fly tire.
No, tie flyer, wave hunter. Maybe that's where I went wrong.
I think that's where you went wrong.
I used to make airplanes on my dad's ties. Never caught any fish off of them though. So anyway, day one wrapped up. Day one. There's the
look at that guy.
It lives.
Made it back home. This is one that I tied up.
What's the name of that? If anybody's wanting to purchase that pattern,
this would be known as the Dungeness Crawdad.
What's the other one you came up with while we were there?
Monster Jam.
Monster Jam.
I tied up a pretty ridiculous Dalai Lama and I caught a fish on it, and that I was beyond stoked because it was a pretty silly looking fly.
You could get away with some things up there.
Was it fun? What was that? Was that the like right at the last fish of the trip too? Right?
Pretty. Yeah. Fun. What?
Like
I had forgotten that I tied those, and somebody's like, "You catch one on your hand tie yet?" And I was like, "Oh shoot." I tied one on, and it was like 4th cast I got a bite, and I'm like, "You're telling me there's a chance?" And then like the next cast, I'm pretty sure it was the same fish, bit it, and I caught a fish, and I retired, took my hat off, and I said, "I'm done."
Hang it up. So yeah, day one was phenomenal. A lot of mouse eats. We caught our first dollies. We caught some graylings. Yeah. I think we're all pretty pleased after day one, to say the least. So their program is breakfast at 7. Get on the river about 8, and then all the guides have to be back at camp by 6 because there's no service up there. So they know if somebody's not back at 6, it's time to go start down the river and go look for somebody that might have a broke down boat or something like that. So we rolled back into camp just before 6, and I think we were just taking it all in. I was, for sure. I know that the first day. There was a lot to take in. So yeah, day one was phenomenal. We had tremendous fishing, and we decided day 2 we wanted to go try the salmon game, right?
Yeah, day 2 was all salmon fishing.
All salmon fishing. So we
rolled a little
out.
trouty at the end.
Yeah, we just caught a few trout at the end.
Well, I think that was the day that what I told people when we got back to camp after day 2 is we caught every fish in the river. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. Every species of fish in the river.
Pack it up, go home. He's caught them all.
And then they made fun of me the rest of the trip. Yeah. So yeah, day 2 we went and targeted salmon. I always, I definitely wanted to go up there to chase the trout, but like, why wouldn't a guy want the opportunity to go and try to hook into like, I don't know, a 20 to 30 pound king? And so that's kind of what we did day 2, and then went and put us in the spot. The first spot I think we caught maybe a humpy or something. And then that second spot, like Lane's over here, I'm over here, Gage is behind us, Logan's losing footage up there. And I think Lane hooked into a couple sockeyes like right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. Yep.
Yeah, Lane there was like kind of this backwater pool almost where you and Casey were fishing, and then Gage was fishing off the main river. But yeah, you hooked a sockeye like right off the bat.
Yeah, it was like I think it was first cast, and then like maybe a cast where I felt one, and then a third cast, another one. And those fish easily go what, 6, 7, 8 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like you're tied on, you're into a battle, and yeah, the stoke started early that day.
It definitely started early, man. You hooked into those 2 fish. Gage was behind us. He caught into a couple chums, which, man, what's your guys' opinion? Like every fish you caught, what was like the best fighting fish?
A chum, I feel like.
A chum?
Yeah.
I think it's a different fight. Everything fights really well up there. The water's so cold, but chums are like a different fight. They're heavy and they don't give up, man. They're not like they're heavy for a while, then you finally get them in. They're heavy until like they're ready to give up, and it could be like 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have. Sorry, go ahead, Gage.
So like you get them in like super close, and then they'll do last run, and they go super far.
Yeah, they always call it the last run because it's like you get them close and they see you, and then they're like, nope, don't want to do that, and they have one more in them. And
they have it. They have this way too of getting into the current and positioning their body where it's this like imagine a 2x4, in the water against the current that you're trying to pull in.
Yeah, a lot of times you get a fish like into the shallows and there's 3/4 of their body sticking above the water, they'll just fall on their side. They were telling us about the chums, dude, they can be in like 2 inches of water and they'll stay upright and they'll be fighting you the whole time, even if you're only in a couple inches of water.
I would say
a cool looking fish too.
Yeah, especially when they start getting colored up.
Yeah. What about you, Lane? What did you think the best fighting fish was up there?
I think I had a chum on. Guide called out I had a chum on, and there was no question that was, but he was on and off so quick that I didn't get that full experience. But my heartbreak, not to underdog your story because I'm sure it's coming up. Right after you hooked into a king, I hooked into a king, and I don't know how big it was, but when that thing figured out it was hooked and turned around and headed downriver, it was like unlike anything else I've ever been hooked into. Like it was his game.
Yeah,
I was just a participant.
It's crazy how fast it got you into your backing too.
Yeah, I mean, I've caught bonefish, I've fought tarpon, and that king gave both of those a run for their money. I mean, he was just like, when he headed downstream, it was 30 seconds backing.
Wow, it was big fish. So I did catch a king, and he fought like hell. Like we were kind of in the slow water, and I caught him in the slow water, and then the main channel came right by it. And so I caught him in the slow water, and he found his way into the fast current. And just like your fish, man, it was like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to land this fish? I finally somehow did land the fish, and it was a nice king. It was like a 12 to 15 pound king. But from what I saw, your fish was way bigger than that. It could have been 25, 30 pounds.
It was big. And like I said, we always want to land all of them. Would have been great to hold it for a picture, but just to participate in that, as long as I did experience it, that was worth the trip alone.
For sure. Which king salmon, I think, are like probably one of the coolest looking fish, I think, up in that water, man. They just look like predators to me.
They're long.
Yeah, they're long. I don't know how long that fish was, but he was 35 probably, maybe.
Yeah, they've lived a life. We got pictures of yours, and they've lived a life. Like they got stories from wherever they've been.
Yeah, from out in the bay to cruising the river, man. Birds are after him, everything's after him. This thing was the one I caught was beat up pretty well. He had some scars on him, But yeah, super cool fish though. But day 2 was awesome, man. Like it really opened my eyes, and that's really when I was like, wow, we are in the like heart of Alaska right now.
I remember there was this one chum that I caught, and you were like, and I was like kind of kicking my butt, and I was like in my backing already. You're like, it's okay, you have strong leader and strong hook, and right as I started to pull it, broke.
Don't listen to Dad. I have a fishing guide up here. Anytime I get a big fish on like a streamer, he goes, "You got big line and a big hook, just horse." Didn't work so well for him. But yeah, day 2 was phenomenal. Like I said, we caught all the salmon, and then we switched spots, started getting into the dollies. We to conclude the day, I don't think Lane had landed a mouse fish yet. So we were like, let's go get some really cool footage of Lane landing a fish on a mouse. And we went and handpicked this little spot. We didn't have much time. And immediately, man, he had a fish just attack the mouse, which was super awesome.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I was digging.
Twice.
Twice.
Yeah.
Yep.
He bit at it once, and then sure enough, he threw it and he got it again.
And that's a one we already got on video. You guys have already put that one up, right?
Yep.
Not that
Yeah.
one. That was a different one.
Oh, not okay. What was amazing was it didn't take long to get to know the river, and you could read the water. We already talked about like where the different fish species lived, but then it didn't take us long to get dialed in too to where the mouse eaters were going to live. Like there was trout everywhere, and there's trout that we knew we would pick up if we threw dolly llamas. But if you wanted a mouse eat, it didn't take long to figure out what water that had to be in as well. And apparently mice live in very particular water.
Yeah.
You just if you found the right water, you swam it right. They were there and they were willing, and man, that one was a cool eat for sure. You see him coming. It's so hard not to pull it away from him because everything's playing out real time.
Well, yeah, that's the biggest problem I think down here is that you throw a mouse for so long with no reaction from the fish that when one finally like goes to eat it, typically, like I know for me, like I pull it way before they ever have it in its mouth. And so when we went up there, like you just have to learn, and it's even tougher up there because they eat it more consistently up there, but you can see the fish. Like, so if you're casting, you can see the fish make a move on it, and immediately you're just like, I want to pull it, but you got to wait for them to get it in their mouth before you set it. But yeah, and that, like Lane was saying, we learned like what water a fish would be willing to eat mouse in a mouse pattern in, and it seemed like it was more like there would always have to be some sort of structure for them to kind of like hide behind, but it had to be like faster moving water, even in like a ripple almost. We tried a lot of the slower water, and it didn't seem like we had very much success in that stuff.
But then one of the other guys would rip a llama right through that other stuff and catch 8 or 10 more fish. So the fish were there.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about the faster moving water doesn't give them a lot of time to like react or like look and like study it. They just react. They see it and they go and eat it. That slower moving water, they can watch it for 5-10 seconds and decide, oh, that's a hand tie that Gage did last night.
That was another thing that's crazy to me, because back home when you're fishing, you're just constantly banging banks, right, with streamers. And then, out there is like, you're not really looking for fishy areas on the bank. You are, but a lot of the times it's these giant root wads that could be in the middle of the freaking widest part of the river. And there could be 4 trout stacked up in this underwater structure that they refer to as a root wad. What they are is just like willow bushes. When the water gets really low, they grow. And then when it gets high, it's just a root wad that collects debris. But middle of the river, you could throw a mouse, and if it's a good root wad with some stuff sticking out, and they'll hit it. So it was like by the end of the trip, we were just like looking for root wads to throw dollies at and mice at. And it was like, root wad is where the fish are.
Yeah, go ahead, Lane.
Yeah, what tripped me out about that too was we all grew up with Field and Stream, right? And every time in the magazine, they're like little diagrams, drawings of where the fish are living around structure. And they always drew fish in front of structure. And never in my life have I caught a fish. As much as I know they're supposed to be there, I've just never done well in front of rocks, in front of root wads. But there, you knew if you landed it 6 feet in front, brought it across the front of that root wad, game on.
It's almost like those fish have like read the playbook. They know.
Yeah,
they read the script. But yeah,
finally the fish ran field and red field. And
yeah, stream. Like what the heck. But yeah, it was like we fished the South Fork. Lane floats the South Fork quite a bit, and like when the salmon flies are on, you're 95% of the day your back is faced towards the middle of the river, and you're just fishing that foot to 2 feet off the bank all day long, right? And that's where the fish hang up. But like in Alaska, like Logan was saying, like the fish are on the banks, but a lot of times they're in the middle of the river. If there's any structure, it almost feels like bass fishing at times.
Totally feels like that.
It's like video game fishing up there. Like everywhere was a cast, everywhere.
I think somebody caught a fish on their back cast, right, Logan?
I did. It was at that salmon spot, dude. My line was everywhere and I flipped it behind me and I'm like organizing it out and I went to flip it forward. I had like a 12-inch Dolly Barden on and it was just like, no, grayling. And I went to cast forward and it was just like, and I had Taylor behind me and Taylor's like, dude, how'd you do that? I was like, I'm a wizard.
Fishing wizard.
Literally had the Dolly Llama probably 10 feet behind me while I was figuring my line out for 5 seconds. And it was probably just sitting on the bottom of the river. And when I flipped it forward, sure enough, there's a fish on it. It was another funny thing is we're used to catching, you know, like it's, I would say hard to catch a small fish up there. And there was that day that you and Gage were fishing the river at. So our arms are primed for the set on these fish. And finally a small fish bit Gage's and he sent that grayling 20 feet over the boat. When he set the hook.
It was like this big.
We call them relocators. Relocated them to a better part of the river.
Yeah.
It's crazy too. Like, I mean, we fished hard. We fished 6 days solid, you know, 8 to 10 hours a day. It's crazy. The more you do it, like the more in tune you get to it. And like the more in tune you get to the bite or what cast you need to make, you know, and it goes back to that, you know, practice makes perfect. It's really true. Like the more time you have on the water to fish, the better you're going to get at it. I feel like I got way better at fishing up there in 6 days than I have in a long time.
Yeah.
Did you feel that way?
No doubt.
I felt better. I felt better about myself.
What I noticed about Gage was after day 1, we called him the stick. Everyone was calling him the stick. He got a pretty big head and started trash talking Dad a whole lot. Did you guys notice that too?
Oh yeah.
I think there was a couple times where he's like, Dad, this is real easy, looking over at me and the comments I usually make to Brian.
I don't think it was just Dad. I think it was anybody next to Gage that
was in earshot.
That did like a small screw up or something. You're hearing about it.
Yeah.
He's gonna let him know.
Yeah.
So yeah, day 2 we wrapped up with landing a couple rad trout on the Mouse. Headed back to camp. Kind of the same scenario. Every night we'd go back. What was really cool is, you know, I always say like what makes a camp is the people, right? You can have all these like beautiful amenities, be in an amazing place with great fishing or hunting, but unless you have really good people, like it can be a bummer. And we had, you know, there was 3 other guests that were there with us. They were phenomenal dudes. The guys were absolutely awesome. Everyone was just got along really great. So it made it fun. Like we'd get back to camp, everyone would have their stories. We'd sit around, eat dinner, tell all our stories, show each other all the pictures from the day. And that was kind of like just like the routine every night.
Yeah, it was sweet.
That was fun for sure. You know, and so everybody there had a story, right? Like not just the stories from the trip, but like who they are, who they were, and you know, there's guys there that you're kind of cheering on. There's a guy there that's 81 years old, and I seemed like every time he took a step, he was about ready to fall over. But those guides took phenomenal care of him and got him into fish, and just to see him brighten from day 1 to day 2 through 6, and you know, the guy, how many times did he say, he's like, I think this is my last trip to Alaska, and it was setting in, but to see the time that he had and how much fun it was for him, you know, that stood out to me almost as much as anything. That was cool.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. It was cool to see that. And I'll talk about that a little bit about that later too. But so day 2 is phenomenal. I can't even, after day 2, like things blend. Like, what did we do day 3, Logie? Do you remember?
I can't remember. I think day 3 we were back on the mouse program. Am I wrong? Because I think day 3 we realized that the footage from day 1 had failed, so we were going to go capture that up again. So we took the jet boat upriver with was that day 3 or day 4?
I think that was day 4.
I don't even remember.
Because day 3.
Yeah.
No
photos.
Remember day 3.
Well, and while you're looking that up, it's something that I'll be the one to raise my hand and like bow my head in shame. At the end, I think it was at the end of day 2, or maybe waking up morning of day 3, we all kind of looked at each other and we're like, this is amazing. I don't know if my arm can make it through 60 hours of this. Like it was a lot of fishing, but then all of a sudden, like you settle into day 3 and 4, and then all of a sudden the time's going too fast. And
100%.
Yeah, it was weird the way the time moved up there.
Yeah, you nailed that for sure. It's like after day two, full day of fishing, it was like, dang, like we have 4 more full days of this, 4 or 5 more full days of this. And then by like 3 and 4, it was just like, now it's going too fast. Yeah, you nailed that.
Yeah, you're right. Like the first 2 days, stoke level's high. Day 3 and 4, it's still high, but it's like, man, like we're kicking our butts. Like we're out there 8 to 10 hours a day and we're fishing like the whole time. If you've ever done like a raft trip or a float trip where you fish all day, like you're pretty worn out by the end of it. Try that for like 3 days in a row and see how you feel. Like I always say, like my back really hurts today. Does that mean I'm casting wrong? Is your back supposed to hurt after a day of fishing? I don't know, but it does. Maybe my technique's not great. Yeah, I still don't know what we did day 3, but I'm sure we had some fun.
Yeah.
I think we did go after the trout again. What day was it? So one of the days I think Logan was talking about.
What was the day 3 is when we went to that little stream. Remember when you guys were catching the ones in the mouse, and me and Rob were catching.
Oh yeah. That was when we went out with Rob and what's his name? Adolf.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fun day. So yeah,
that was a spectacular day.
Trout again. So we went after the mouse. There's this one little back channel. It was probably 500-600 yards long. And me and Lane had the mouse on. We went kind of ripped through it, caught a couple really cool fish. And then Gage was behind us just cleaning house with, what were you throwing, a Dolly Varden?
Dolly Varden.
How many fish did you catch that day?
I don't remember.
He caught a lot. And that was the day I experienced something you don't want to do in Alaska. Here's a tip for you. You guys should write this down. Planning to go to Alaska during mosquito season.
I have a great photo of this.
Do whatever you can, especially at camp. If you have a flushable toilet, do whatever you can to use that toilet while you're there, either before your day of fishing or after. Because if you don't, you're going to get struck with something I got struck with. And that is mosquitoes down their area.
Undercarriage.
So we were on this gravel bar and I was like, with where we were at, there's no trees, right? There's very few trees. It was all just willow bushes. And so we're on this gravel bar. Everyone's kind of spread out. And I was like, all right, I need to go make some things happen. Grabbed the wipes, went over just into a little, Gage has the picture on his phone. That's me with, that was the second time. That's toilet paper in one hand, DEET in the other.
Spray in the other.
So the first
second time, meaning he didn't learn.
I got out into the bushes and there wasn't a ton of mosquitoes around. So I was like, I'll be good. So I go out, get in the bushes, like trying to hide from everybody, dig a little hole. And dude, the mosquitoes live in the bushes, obviously. But as soon as they smell like fresh skin they haven't bit yet, they attack you. And they attack you at places you don't want to be attacked. And it was literally like maybe a minute and a half process, which is probably the fastest I've ever done it. And I had bites everywhere. Like literally a small village of mosquitoes found me and bit you in places you don't want to be bit. So tip for you, if you do have to do that, make sure you just DEET the crap out of the downstairs area.
I don't know what you're doing, but honestly, when I did it, I had no mosquito.
Kids figure out a way to do it. I'm still trying to figure it out. But yeah, it was a phenomenal day. We caught a bunch more fish, trout, got some really cool eats. Our biggest thing going up there is we wanted some really cool footage of like trout eating mice patterns. And I think we got quite a few that day, right?
Yeah, in total, we got double digits. We got like 10 or 11, like pretty solid dedicated mouse eats. But that day we definitely got some. That was the one you had a lazy trout just come up so slow and slurp it and then go back down.
That was like one of the first fish we caught on a mouse in that like slower water. And it was interesting to see because it was a ripple and then went to slow water and we saw the fish in there. And so I cast it out there and the fish moved on it one time and I casted it back and you could just see the fish coming out of the depths. And dude, he just barely broke the water, just grabbed it and went right back down, like super lazy.
That was also the day that I caught the mouse that I tied.
Yep, that was the day that Gage experienced his first fish on his own tie.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet.
So anyway, we don't need to break down every day, but biggest takeaways, I want to talk about that. So this was, just be clear, this was mine, Gage's, and Lane's very first time in Alaska. Logan went and did a trip last year where he kind of did that typical go to Alaska. They caught a bunch of fish to bring home, and then he went on the deer hunt, the Sitka blacktail hunt, which was awesome, right? This was all like our three first times like being into Alaska. And so like what was some of your takeaways you had, Lane, of after the whole trip was wrapped up, and even after, like you were talking about, like the last couple of days since we've been home?
Yeah, definitely one of the trips that afterwards has been one where like I just several times a day find my mind going back, just everything about it. I think we talked several times. The guides talked about several times. In fact, one of the head guides pulled me aside towards the end of the trip, and he's like, I just want to tell you guys, like, this is one of the funnest weeks I've ever had as a guide up here. And so I think a lot of it was the chemistry, you know, just having a fun group. Everybody in camp was great. Adolf was a great story too. He's from the village of Kunnahawk, and he was up there as a guide, got hired on with them. Just one of the nicest, most giving guys. Brought beluga whale to camp. He's in his life, he's gotten 2 of those, and he's willing to share, you know, that, and that's a big deal to them. Like that's like them getting a beluga. I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's a big deal that they've got one. And for him to like come share that with us and try it. Now, how we perceived it might be a little bit different, but you know, just his willingness to share and be awesome. Dude gave chiropractic adjustments on the side of the river.
Pretty legit.
Yeah, that day 3 we were just talking about, I just hear him say, "Get down on your knees." I'm like, I don't know where this is going. I'm going fishing though. And Lane gets down, and I see him doing this thing, and I turn around, and Lane's a big dude, and he's down on his knees like this, and Adolf gets behind him and interlocks his arms through Lane's, and all of a sudden just picks him up, and you can hear Lane's back just go. And then he tried it on Logan.
I learned it on TikTok.
Well, I guess there's one day we should probably bring up. It was the day we took the river rat up and we were trying to get the cool shots of the drone and us catching fish. And then we got back into the main stretch of things. And this is really like where I have a lot of fun with fishing, is there's a lot of trash talking going back and forth. And that was kind of the day it really started. We waited a few days to make it happen. You know, and these guys would float by with a fish on and be letting us know. And we'd float by with a fish on, let us know. And so one time we're floating, we were behind them. Me and Gage were in a boat with Cutler, and we were floating behind them. And these guys were in the river rat, and they're hooping and hollering. They got fish on, and we kind of got around a corner. They were going to the side of the bank, and we kind of lost sight of you guys, but we heard a lot of yelling and stuff. What happened exactly?
The best moment of the whole trip. Scary, but best moment of the whole trip.
We had a double on is all I remember, right? We just caught a couple fish, and that was a great day. What happened day 5?
You were like really hot or something, and you're like, maybe I should take a dip in the water. So I'll break it down. I'll tell the story. So we had caught some stud rainbows, and Lane had just caught this really stud rainbow. And so we pulled over, we're getting out, and it's kind of not the most ideal place to pull over. It was one of those deals where it's grass right to the water, and then there's some kind of bank, then it just drops off, right? And it was me, Lane, and a guy named Taylor in the river rat. And so we got out, and obviously, you know, we're taking pictures of this fish and videoing it. And as Lane was getting the hook out, the fish jumped and swam like into the grass. And so this fish is swimming into the grass, and then we're like trying to get it back in the water. And Taylor's like, "There's a dorsal fin just like sticking out of the grass." And Lane grabs it out of the grass, gets it back in the water. We're all good and let the fish go. And we're getting back into the boat, and I hop in first, and I'm up front, and I'm facing away, and I'm taking my glasses off and cleaning them because water has gotten everywhere. And Lane's laughing. He gets in the boat, and Lane's like, "Man, what a rodeo." And he's like, "What?" The exact point a rodeo turns into a goat rope is if you would have fallen in the water. And right as he said that, keep in mind, I'm still not looking back. I'm laughing. I'm looking forward. Right as he says that, Taylor does one of these maneuvers because it was kind of deep, pushes on the side of the river rat to get up in. And I just hear this big commotion behind me. And I turn around like, what are they doing? And all I see is the bottoms of Lane's wader boots, size 12. just sticking up out of the water. And I see Taylor just completely helpless with his leg up, stuck on the oarlock, just looking at me like, I'm going to save everybody. And I'm like, I'm sitting there laughing. I'm like, well, grab him.
Get Logan no help whatsoever.
Poor first year.
And so Taylor finally just
Poor first year guide.
just reaches down and grabs him and pulls him up, and Lane's hat's all sideways and his glasses are like down here on his face. just sopping wet. Sopping wet. And Taylor, I could tell Taylor felt so bad, and Lane was like, no big deal, no big deal. So yeah, Lane definitely took a spill into the water, and him and it looked as though that they were doing underwater leg wrestling when it happened. So we get that all sorted out. We get everybody in the boat, and I'm like looking at them like, are you guys good? Like, do we need to pull over and take a breather or something? And so we float down to this next bank where you guys were, and they're getting out. And as soon as Lane's getting out, he gets tangled up in some fly line and jumps out and just snaps Gage's rod. And I'm like, guys, we need to calm down here, okay?
Slow her down.
This all happened. I watched Cucumber Cool Lane way up here go to hot mess lane in about 10 minutes. Just still soaking wet, water coming out of his ears, breaking rods.
It was like gone from rodeo to goat rope.
As soon as you said that too, you're like, you want to know the exact moment it goes from a rodeo to a goat rope is when someone falls in the water. Kerplunk.
On cue.
I'm just stoked that, because I'm a pretty accident prone person in the wilderness. I went the whole trip without getting wet or breaking a rod, and I felt pretty accomplished about that.
Yeah, Logan was dialed this trip. No, besides the footage being lost, which is out of his hands.
Which is, what do you do?
No cameras were lost. You didn't break a rod, which the rest of us did.
Yeah.
Good work,
all
Logan.
three of you guys broke a rod, right?
Yeah.
Mom would be proud of you. Mom would be proud.
Take extra rods to Alaska.
Yeah. So yeah, just a little like gear breakdown. Going to Alaska, doing what we were doing. We were mostly fishing with 6 weights for trout, and dollies and Arctic or graylings, and then all salmon species were on 8 weights or 10 weights. And I think you could probably get away with most of the salmon on an 8 weight, unless you hook into that 25-30 pound king, and then you'd be wishing you had a 10 weight for sure.
Yeah.
In fact, that one day you landed into that chum only for a second. It was on a 6 weight. We were fishing for trout, and that chum ate that Olive Garden, and it was game on.
Yeah, it was, and I had no chance. It didn't feel like, man, that was you have little flashes about the trip, and some stand out more than others, but that little side channel that we stopped in, and we were fishing, like all of us were lined up within like 4 feet of each other, but just the fish kept moving through, and that was a fun one.
That was fun, man.
That was definitely a fun one.
We caught Dolly's trout. You had that chum on. I had a chum on the 6 weight, and then I caught a couple sockeyes. We caught in just this tiny little channel. So, all right, Logan, biggest takeaway.
It's hard to, from the whole trip.
Yeah.
Biggest takeaway for me, I have a couple, but I'm going to say this one is, I'm going to steal it from you. If you have something like this in your mind that you've always wanted to do, quit dreaming, make a plan, execute that plan, and just go do it. I mean, I feel kind of spoiled, at the age of 26, and I can say that I've been to Alaska twice, and it comes with the job, obviously. But it is true when they say, don't go to Alaska as a young man, because nothing else will ever compare. Do what you have to do and get up there. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure, man. What I was going to say earlier is the old gentleman that was in camp. It was kind of cool to see, like, and this is the perspective I took on it. And he kept making that mention is like, this is probably like my last big trip. He's just get too old and too hard to get around, but he had a lot of experiences in Alaska. Like, he chose to do that at a young age, and he did that for a long time. Like, he used to go float a river called the Good News River, and they'd float at him and his buddies every year. And And then his buddies became too old. And so this was kind of like his trip to like go back to Alaska, but not have to do it like a DIY style. But it was cool for me to see that, because it was kind of like this era of this guy that had done all these cool things in Alaska, and him being at the end of it, and then seeing a guy like Gage, who's only 13 and experiencing it for the first time. And me just thinking about all those experiences, if Gage chooses to, that he can experience in Alaska or wherever it might be. And so it was like, in my head, it was like this timeline of, you know, what you choose to do in life. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't have the money to go do that, or I don't have the time to do that. I feel like most people do. They just choose other things instead. I could have went to Alaska numerous times before now, but I just chose to go do other things instead of Alaska. And to Logan's point, figure out that one thing that you want to do and always wanted to do. And don't wait until you're an old man to go do it, because Randy Newberg, if you guys know, he has a famous saying that I always refer back to. It says, you'll run out of health before you run out of money. And I believe that to be true. Like, you can figure out a way to go and make this dream happen. You just have to maybe, you know, pick and choose what you do to make it happen. But, you know, for me, I just chose not to go to Alaska for whatever reason. I always wanted to, but I'm glad I got to experience with Gage, obviously the first time, and you guys. And yeah, I think it was a trip of a lifetime, without a doubt.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What's your big takeaway, big dog?
Don't grow up and then you could just get these trips for free.
Great. Make dad pay for him.
Yeah.
Perfect. Great takeaway.
Wise beyond his years.
Yes, he is. I think the only thing that would have made this trip like absolutely, it was perfect. But the only thing is, I wanted to see a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
And we never did see a grizzly bear. They are definitely up there. Every gravel bar you stop on, every bank you jump out, there are grizzly bear tracks on that river.
Definitely.
The reason that they're a little shy is because the Inuit people do hunt them in the fall. And so they kind of get smart to what a boat sounds like, and they know what happens when they see a boat. So, but besides that, man, I couldn't ask for anything more. Like you said earlier, Lane, especially like when we got home, I was burnt out, man. I was like, you go, if it's hunting for 7 days or fishing or whatever it might be for 7 days, you kind of get burnt out on it. When I remember when I got home, I'm like, I think I'm good on the summer for fishing. But then you start like looking through the footage and, you know, give it 2 days. I'm like, dude, if they would let me go back, if my wife would let me go back, I'd go back tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would come with.
And Gage would come with for free.
Remember day 4 when you were trying to catch that grayling and it kept eating it like 10 times?
Yeah, that's, you know, not to go back what we've already talked about, but just what we said earlier. There was a spot that day you fell out of the boat, and there was one grayling that literally tried to eat my fly at least 17 times, and it became a joke after a while. And I was like, try to eat my fly, I bet you can't take it from me. He'd come eat it. Next cast, grayling. Next cast. It was pretty funny. But
This grayling has super small mouths.
so just wrap things up, guys. Thanks for listening as always. Lane, thanks for coming on here. Thanks for going on the trip with us. Any last plugs for River Rat? What do you guys got coming up?
Yeah, some exciting stuff. Something's always in development, but if you want to check it out, riverratusa.com or riverratus on Instagram. Appreciate you guys letting us plug that, but more than anything, thanks for the friendship. Thanks for the opportunity to go, because it was incredible.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you were able to come and experience that with us. That was a heck of a time. As always, guys, we appreciate your support. If you guys have not watched these videos yet, go and watch them. They're right here on the YouTube channel. If you're listening to this and not watching it, the YouTube channel, go to youtube.com/Hushin and check out the videos. I think you guys will appreciate them. Logan did a fantastic job capturing the trip. And yeah. Laters. Great job, guys.
Good job, guys, all around.
Good one.
Good work.
Real good. Let's stop the recording here.